My name is Marina Xu. I am 22 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I am a senior finance major and a project coordinator at my family investment group. On paper, my life looks clean, polished, and carefully protected. 3 days ago, my boyfriend of 3 years tried to buy my dignity with $10,000 in cash. His name is Ethan Kin. Until last week, he was just another ambitious student with borrowed confidence and a borrowed future. Then his biological parents found him. Overnight, he became the long-lost heir of the Chin family, a name that opens doors in rooms most people never enter. With that discovery, he decided I no longer belonged beside him. He asked me to meet him at a quiet cafe near campus. He did not look nervous. He looked relieved. He told me we were no longer compatible. He said social class was reality, not romance. He said the Kin family had already arranged a marriage for him, one that was appropriate, strategic, and respectable. Then he smiled and added that he still cared about me. I listened in silence while he explained that I could remain in his life, just not in the light. He said discretion was normal in elite circles. He said many powerful men kept women like me. He said I should be practical and grateful. When I asked who the bride was, he said her name with pride, Emily Xu, the young lady of the Xu family. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. The woman he was so desperate to marry was an orphan my parents had taken in years ago. He did not know that. He did not know who I was sitting across from him. When he finished speaking, he reached into his bag and placed a thick stack of bills on the table. He told me it was repayment for the past, $10,000. Cash. He pushed it toward me and waited, already convinced of my worth. I picked up the money and threw it back into his face. Bills scattered across the floor, drawing startled looks from strangers who did not understand what they were witnessing. I told him that if he wanted to end things, he could have done it with honesty. I told him this was charity, not compensation. As I walked away, I did not cry. I felt something colder take root. Ethan Chin believed he had chosen correctly. He believed I was disposable. He did not realize that the woman he tried to humiliate was the one standing at the center of the world he was so desperate to enter. This is where my story truly begins. Not with heartbreak, but with clarity. I did not lose a future that day. I gained control of it, and I decided no one would ever reduce me to a price again. That lesson would define everything that followed afterward completely. I arrived at the Xu family birthday gala, with my mother's hand resting lightly on my arm, her touch calm and steady, as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong tonight. The ballroom was flooded with warm golden light, crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished marble floors, and the familiar hum of polite laughter from people who measured each other by last names, net worth, and silence. This was not just a party. This was a stage. I stood at the top of the staircase for a brief moment, unseen, looking down at the crowd. That was when I spotted Ethan. He was impossible to miss, dressed in an immaculate suit, standing tall among a cluster of young executives and heirs. By his side was Emily Xu, her head tilted toward him, her smile soft, practiced, and slightly nervous. They looked comfortable together, intimate even. It would have been convincing if I had not known the truth. I felt no jealousy, only amusement. A sharp, quiet kind. "Marina, why are you still standing there?" my mother asked gently. "Come down. It is your night." I adjusted my dress, smoothed my hair, and followed her down the steps. The moment my heels touched the floor, I felt the shift. Conversations slowed. Eyes turned. Recognition spread in waves, from mild curiosity to visible surprise. I walked forward with my back straight and my expression neutral, exactly as my mother had taught me. Ethan noticed me almost immediately. I saw the exact second his face froze. His smile faltered, his pupils shrinking, as if his mind could not process what his eyes were seeing. He stared at me like I was an illusion that refused to disappear. "What is she doing here?" he muttered, loud enough for Emily to hear. I stopped a few feet away from them and raised an eyebrow. "That is an interesting question," I said calmly. "Should I be asking the same thing?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Marina, do not embarrass yourself," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "I already made things clear. This is not a place you belong. A ripple of silence spread outward. People pretended not to listen while listening to everything. I smiled slightly. You seem very confident for someone standing at my birthday party. Emily turned sharply toward him. Your birthday? Before Ethan could answer, my father's voice cut cleanly through the tension. Marina. He approached with my mother at his side, pride evident in his eyes. Why are you standing here instead of greeting our guests? He asked warmly. Then, his gaze fell on Ethan, polite but distant. Ah, you must be Ethan Chin? We have heard quite a bit about you. Ethan's face drained of color. Mr. Xu, he said stiffly, bowing his head slightly. It is an honor. My mother smiled. Marina, introduce your friends. Friends. The word hung heavy. I looked directly at Ethan. This is Ethan Kin, I said evenly. My former boyfriend. The heir snapped. And this, I continued, turning to Emily, is Emily Xu. She grew up with us. Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father frowned slightly. Former? Ethan opened his mouth, clearly scrambling. There has been a misunderstanding, he said quickly. I did not realize Marina was the Xu family's only biological daughter? My mother finished calmly. A collective intake of breath swept the room. Emily took a step back, her eyes wide. Marina, you never said. I never needed to, I replied softly. Ethan looked like the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Then Emily is my parents' adopted daughter, I said, which makes your assumptions unfortunate. People began whispering openly now. Ethan stood frozen, exposed, his earlier arrogance stripped away in seconds. I think, my father said, his tone cool but controlled, this conversation is inappropriate for tonight. I met Ethan's eyes one last time. You are right, I said. We do not belong in the same world. Then I turned away, leaving him surrounded by judgment he could not escape, knowing the game had only just begun. The bidding conference room on the 42nd floor of Xu Group headquarters was colder than the ballroom had ever been. Glass walls, steel frames, no music, no polite laughter. This was where numbers mattered more than last names, and mistakes were punished without mercy. I took my seat at the head of the long table, the position assigned to the project lead. Today, that was me. Across from me sat Ethan Chin, spine straight, jaw tense, a carefully neutral expression pasted onto his face. To his right was the finance director of Chin Corporation, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. On the other side of the table sat Lucas Kin, calm as ever, flipping through a slim folder with unhurried confidence. He did not look at Ethan once. The project was simple on the surface and brutal underneath. Xu Group was investing heavily in next-generation chip technology. Whoever won this bid would not only receive funding, but long-term partnership, prestige, and survival. Everyone in the room understood that this contract could determine which companies would still exist 5 years from now. I began the session without ceremony. We will proceed directly to final evaluations, I said. Each bidder has submitted financial projections, technical frameworks, and 3-year sustainability models. Independent auditors have already completed preliminary reviews. Ethan leaned back slightly, his confidence returning in increments. Chin Corporation had been around for decades. Their name carried weight. He believed that alone would protect him. Presentations followed, one by one. Polished slides. Buzzwords. Promises that sounded impressive but familiar. When it was Lucas's turn, he spoke briefly. No theatrics. No exaggeration. He focused on data, scalability, and long-term adaptability. He talked about failures as openly as successes. Investors leaned forward without realizing it. Then came the preliminary results. Based on the evaluation criteria, I said evenly, Chin Corporation currently ranks first. Ethan's shoulders relaxed. He shot a quick, triumphant glance toward Lucas, who showed no reaction at all. But something did not sit right with me. Before final confirmation, I continued, I am exercising my right as project coordinator to review the original financial submissions again. Ethan stiffened. Is there a problem? He asked, unable to mask the edge in his voice. The process has already concluded. Transparency is part of the process, I replied calmly. If everything is in order, this will only take a few minutes. I requested the raw financial data. Not summaries, not projections, originals. As the documents appeared on the screen, the room grew quiet. Too quiet. I scanned the numbers slowly. Revenue growth, operating costs, cash flow. At first glance, it looked acceptable. Then, I noticed the margins. They were too clean, too consistent. Real companies do not bleed in perfect lines. I looked up. These figures do not align with Kin Corporation's actual performance over the past 3 years. The finance director cleared his throat. There may be differences in accounting methods. There are differences, I agreed, but not errors this large. Ethan leaned forward. Marina, you are overstepping. This feels personal. I met his eyes. If it were personal, I would not be giving you this chance to explain. I turned to my assistant. Please bring in the independent auditor. The door opened. The auditor entered, pale and uncomfortable, holding a folder he had clearly hoped not to open in this room. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Explain why Chin Corporation submitted financial health exceeds their verified minimum eligibility threshold when their real numbers fall significantly below it. The auditor hesitated. The finance director's face tightened. Finally, the truth began to unravel. Adjusted figures, temporary reclassification, external pressure, and at the center of it all, a silent approval chain that led back to one name, Emily Xu. The room erupted into murmurs. Ethan's face drained of color as realization hit him. He turned toward the empty chair where Emily should have been sitting. She guaranteed the numbers, the finance director said weakly. She said the Xu Group would not question them. I closed the folder. Then you were wrong, I said. I stood. Chin Corporation is disqualified for financial misrepresentation. The bid is awarded to Lingnan Technologies. Lucas finally looked up, surprise flickering briefly across his face before it vanished. Ethan stared at me, as if I had struck him. This is not over, he said hoarsely. No, I replied. It is. The meeting ended in silence. People left quickly, avoiding eye contact, already calculating damage control. I stayed seated until the room was empty, then rose and headed for the elevator. Instead of returning to my office, I went straight to Emily's. She was waiting when I arrived, standing by the window, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. You knew, she said quietly. Yes. She turned to face me. I did it for survival. You did it for ambition, I corrected. Those are not the same. She tried to defend herself. Marriage, security, fear of being replaced. Words poured out, but they no longer mattered. You had choices, I said. You chose betrayal. I left her office without waiting for forgiveness. By the time I reached the top floor, my father was already standing by the window, city lights stretching endlessly below. I heard, he said. I handled it, I replied. He nodded once. Good. That night, Ethan lost his bid. Emily lost her position. And I learned something important. Power does not need to announce itself. It only needs to be precise. The private dining room Ethan reserved for the graduation dinner was extravagant in the way people chose when they wanted to be seen spending money. Gold-trimmed walls, a crystal ceiling fixture, wine that cost more per bottle than most students earned in a month. When I arrived, the room was already loud with laughter, glasses clinking, voices layered with forced confidence about the future. Ethan was in his element. He moved from table to table like a host who believed the room existed because of him. Designer suit, expensive watch, that same restless pride burning behind his eyes. He wanted witnesses. He wanted validation. He wanted everyone to remember that he was the real Chin heir. Lucas was already seated when I walked in, calm and composed, speaking quietly with one of his former professors. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. No performance. No claiming. Just presence. I sat beside him, without ceremony, and felt the air around us shift. Ethan noticed immediately. He walked over with a glass of wine in hand, cheeks already flushed. So you really came, he said, smiling too widely. I thought maybe you would be too busy running interference for Lingnan. I was invited, I replied evenly. Same as you. He laughed, a little too loudly. Right? Of course. You always show up when you should not. A few people nearby glanced over. I ignored them. Lucas remained silent. Dinner progressed. But Ethan drank faster than anyone else. Every toast was louder than the last. Every story centered on himself. His inheritance. His plans. His future. Each word carried the weight of insecurity he refused to acknowledge. Eventually, his glass landed heavily on the table. I think, he said, voice raised, there is something everyone should know. Lucas looked up. Ethan, this is not the time. Oh, it is exactly the time, Ethan snapped. He turned to the room. Since we are all celebrating new beginnings, let us talk about honesty. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. Some people, he continued, pointing at Lucas, build their confidence on borrowed identities, enjoying privileges that were never meant for them, pretending they earned what they were handed. The room went quiet. Say what you want, Lucas replied calmly, but do not confuse your inheritance with your ability. That was when Ethan lost control. He slammed his glass to the floor, wine splashing across polished wood. You think you can talk down to me? He shouted. You lived my life for 20 years. My parents. My name? My place. Whispers spread instantly. Phones appeared in hands. Lucas stood. I built my company without your name, without your money. That is why this bothers you. Ethan's face twisted. You are nothing. He swung. The motion was clumsy, fueled by alcohol and rage. Lucas stepped aside easily, the punch slicing through empty air. Chairs scraped. Someone gasped. Before anyone could react further, the door opened. Enough, Mr. Chin's voice cut through the chaos like steel. He entered with two assistants, his expression controlled but cold. The room fell silent as if a switch had been flipped. Ethan froze, arms still half raised. What is going on, Mr.? Chin asked, already knowing the answer. Father, Ethan stammered. I was just. Sit down, Mr. Chin said sharply. Ethan obeyed, suddenly small. Mr. Chin surveyed the room, his gaze landing briefly on me, then on Lucas. This dinner is over, he announced. I apologize for the embarrassment. Assistants began quietly instructing guests to leave. Phones were gently but firmly requested. Videos were deleted under watchful eyes. No one argued. When the room finally emptied, only 5 of us remained. Mr. Chin turned to Ethan. I warned you, he said, voice low. Family matters are not entertainment. Ethan tried to speak. I stepped forward. Mr. Chin, I said calmly. There is something you should hear. He looked at me. Go on. I repeated everything. The breakup, the offer, the money, the bid manipulation, Emily's involvement, Ethan's approval. I did not embellish. I did not soften. Ethan's face drained of color. Mr. Chin's jaw tightened. Is this true? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Mr. Chin exhaled slowly. You have humiliated this family, he said. And yourself. He turned to me. You will tell your parents everything. We will accept whatever consequences they decide. Then he looked back at his son. As for you, you are leaving the country. Immediately. You will learn discipline before you inherit anything. Ethan shook his head. You cannot do this. I can, Mr. Chin replied. And I will. Ethan looked at me with desperation. Marina, say something. I met his eyes. I already did. Later that night, I stood beside Lucas in the quiet parking structure. The noise was gone. The lights were dim. Why did you choose me? He asked softly. Because you never asked me to shrink, I replied. He nodded. That was the moment everything finally ended, and something real began. After that night, the world did not explode the way people imagine justice should. There were no headlines, no dramatic apologies, no public confessions. Things ended quietly, the way real power prefers them to end. Ethan left the country within 10 days. Officially, it was for overseas training. Unofficially, it was exile. His name stopped appearing in conversations that mattered. Invitations dried up. Opportunities evaporated. I never heard from him again, and I did not need to. Some lessons do not require closure. They require distance. Emily was dismissed from Xu Group without spectacle. My parents did not shame her, did not destroy her future, but they drew a line she could never cross again. She was sent abroad to study, far from the network she had tried to manipulate. I felt no triumph in that, only relief. Ambition without integrity is a quiet poison, and I was glad it was no longer near me. Life returned to structure, meetings, deadlines, decisions. I defended my thesis, graduated on schedule, and officially stepped into my role within the company. For the first time, I was not proving anything to anyone. I was simply working, and it felt steady. Lucas and I did not rush into romance. We talked about strategy, about responsibility, about what it meant to build something without needing to conquer someone else in the process. Trust grew the way it should, not through promises, but through consistency. When our families proposed an engagement, it was not framed as rescue or reward. It was a partnership, clear terms, mutual respect, shared direction. I agreed because I wanted to, not because I was cornered. The engagement ceremony was elegant and controlled, attended by people who understood what it represented. When Lucas knelt to place the ring on my hand, there was no pressure in the gesture, only certainty. He promised me stability, honesty, and space to remain myself. I promised the same. Later, standing beside him, under soft lights and quiet applause, I realized something important. I was not choosing a man to protect me. I was choosing an equal who would not ask me to disappear so he could feel tall. I often think back to the cafe where Ethan tried to reduce me to a stack of bills. If I had taken the money, even out of anger, my story would have ended there. But dignity is not loud. It does not scream. It simply refuses. I learned that love without respect is a transaction waiting to happen. That power without discipline self-destructs. And that walking away is sometimes the most decisive move you can make. I did not win because I outplayed anyone. I won because I never agreed to be small. This is not a story about revenge. It is a story about knowing your worth, holding it steady, and letting everyone else reveal themselves in the process.